Next steps, we need to sand and refine our wax piece. I've got a small pile of sandpaper here, and the first sandpaper we're going to use is the coarsest, and this is 400 grade sandpaper. So it's worth cutting them ready and also keeping them in order. Sometimes the number disappears off the back when you've cut the piece of sandpaper, so it's worth just writing what number is what. It avoids any confusion. So we need to sand and smooth and take away any of our file marks that we didn't want. So for flat pieces, the easiest way is to lay your sandpaper down flat on the table and actually to rub your wax flat on the table. I find a figure of 8 or circular motions is quite helpful, or even back and forwards. It's not the end of the world either way. And you'll start to see that you're smoothing it off. You can still see a few small file marks that I'm going to try hard to remove. But at this stage, it's really worth trying hard to get all those file marks to disappear. And I'm really getting there now. I've just got a couple more that I'm just going to remove. And I might just pick up my piece of sandpaper and target that area rather than taking off too much material elsewhere. And it's very important again to blow away the dust and to smooth it all off so you can see exactly what you're having to deal with. You can still see a few more file marks. I'm just going to carry on sanding. You can be quite firm at this stage, but this generally is the part where your wax potentially may break. So please try and support as much of the wax piece as possible. Don't kind of hold it from the smaller end and start sanding. There is a certain amount of flexibility within this wax, and it is very, very easy at this stage, as I said, to break it. You don't want to ruin all your hard work. So support the piece with your hand or flat on the table as much as possible. So I've sanded both the sides, the flat sides, and I'm happy that there aren't any more file marks. I'm just going to use my sandpaper in my hand to actually sand off the edges. I want to make sure the whole piece is nice and smooth and completely free from file marks. So I'm pretty happy now that I've got rid of my file marks, and I'm going to work on to the next grade of sandpaper, which is 600 grade. So this is slightly finer, a little bit less coarse than the 400, and I'm just going to repeat exactly the same process. I just want to remove all of the marks left by the 400 sandpaper before I move on to the next sandpaper. So you may find that you don't need to spend quite as long on the slightly finer sandpapers. The hard work is in the 400 grade. That's where you need to remove the biggest scratches and the file marks. Okay, so I'm happy with my wax piece now. I've done my 600 grade sandpaper, and I'm going to move on again now to the 800 grade. So you may have guessed, exactly the same process. I'm just going to keep sanding until we're really happy that we've got a lovely smooth finish. So I just want to show you how the ring is looking at this stage and what we're aiming for. So you can see that there are still a few marks, but we're getting the majority of the big scratches and the marks out from the surface of the wax. So we're aiming for a nice, smooth, polished finish once we're done with our sanding. So I'm happy with my 800 grade sandpaper. I'm pleased that there doesn't seem to be too many big scratches left anymore, so I'm ready to move on to the final grade of sandpaper. What's worth noting is that we don't often do too much work to the inside of the ring band. It, at this stage, gets a little bit fine, and if you start putting too much sandpaper through the inside of the ring, you do have a risk of breaking your ring at this stage. it would be worth just rolling, maybe even halving the amount of sandpaper and rolling it up into a tube and just lightly sanding around the inside just to take off any marks left by the wax reamer. Just be very careful at this stage. I'm ready to move on to the last grade of sandpaper. So this is grade 1000, and this should give it a really nice smooth finish, and then we are done. Right, so I'm pretty happy now that I don't have any scratches left, that my ring is nicely polished and smooth. The last sort of thing that I usually do is just give it a once over with my fingertips just to remove any of that dust. You can also use a little bit of steel wool, some very, very fine grade steel wool if you've got too much dust or if you've got any sort of crevices in the detail and design of your piece. So I'm happy now that I've got a nice smooth polished ring, that I don't have any unwanted necessary scratches or file marks in the piece. And I would say that that is now finished. So it's exactly as I wanted it to look. I've got a nice taper on the inside of the ring band. I've got a nice angled top, and everything looks as I had hoped for in my design. So next steps in terms of getting this cast into metal, you will see in the notes that we have suggested a couple of casting companies to use. My recommendation would be either Just Castings or West One Castings. They're in Hatton Garden and they're both very friendly and very, very helpful. So you can take your wax piece to a casting company and ask for whatever metal you'd like it to be in. So you can ask for sterling silver, for rose gold, yellow gold, anything that you fancy. It will take about 1 week, sometimes slightly longer if the casters have a lot of work on. And you can ask them to post it back to you, to your address. If you don't have the ability or the tools to finish and polish a piece of silver, you can ask the casters to polish your piece for you, and that can be really helpful and is also quite good for if you're feeling very short on time. Or you can take one of our silversmithing courses and learn the basics of piercing and filing, smoothing and polishing. If you're not making your ring for yourself, you may need to use a ring sizer. What we've got here are some plastic ring sizers, and each ring has a letter on it, a UK letter, a ring size. So what you would do is ask the person that you're making a ring for to actually try on these ring sizers and select the correct size for their finger. So say if I had a friend who wanted a ring size P, I would select this ring size, and then I can actually pop that onto my ring mandrel and see where the ring size comes to. If you're lucky and you have a steel sized mandrel, you don't need this step. You can just pop the wax down onto your mandrel and you can see where it needs to be, where it needs to sit. What is useful to note is that the inside, the middle part, the inside of the ring needs to sit on the line of the size that you're after. So if you're after a P, this is just about a P. It's a slight bit smaller than a P. Okay, so if you want something slightly more organic shaped and you don't necessarily want smooth lines and geometry, you can use your file to actually carve into the wax a little bit more randomly. I find the corner or the edge of these files is very, very useful for creating grooves and channels and unusual shapes. So there is no real art to this, just pick up your file and start to carve. This is an example of the kind of thing that we're going for. So nice organic texture, nothing too prescriptive, just sit down and get started with your file, and sometimes the best pieces can actually come out of not having a design. So that's it, we've finished, and I hope you've really enjoyed the course. I hope that you'll give this a go. It's a lovely, easy project and is absolutely perfect for complete beginners. So don't feel worried if you haven't ever done anything like this before. Hopefully we've broken it down into easy to follow steps. If you want any more information, then please do download the notes that are on the website. It gives you a little bit more information about casting processes and the casting companies that you can use. Do look out for some slightly more advanced wax carving courses that are soon to be launched. They're really, really good fun projects, and hopefully you'll now be hooked on wax carving.